Welcome to Void Case Files. I'm your host, and before we begin, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. We're pushing hard to reach 1,000 subscribers by New Year's, and we need your help. We're committed to bringing you daily videos, real cases, real evidence, real terror. Now, let's get into it. The wind howled through the Wind River Mountains that August night in 1997, but it wasn't the only sound. What you're about to hear is based on the true disappearance of David Crouch, a 27-year-old man from Maryland who vanished without a trace at Island Lake. But there's more to this story than what made the newspapers. Much more. And it starts with a sheriff who saw something in those mountains that changed him forever. Nobody believed Sheriff Hank Ruland until they found what he left behind. August 31st, 1997. Sheriff Hank Ruland was eating dinner with his wife when the phone rang. Terry Pollard's voice came through tight and controlled, but Ruland heard the tremor underneath. "Hank, one of my clients didn't come back, 5 hours overdue." Ruland set down his fork, already running through the checklist. Name, age, experience level, gear. David Crouch, 27, from Maryland. Blue jeans and a flannel shirt. No pack, no survival equipment. Just a fishing rod and enthusiasm. "I'll be there in 2 hours." His wife touched his hand as he stood. "Be careful up there." Something in her voice made him pause. She'd grown up in Pinedale, heard the old stories. Her grandmother had been Eastern Shoshone, and she'd told young Margaret about the mountains, about when to stay away. "It's late summer," Margaret said quietly. Grandmother always said late summer was when the mountains were hungry. Ruland kissed her forehead. "I'll be home tomorrow." He wouldn't be home for 3 days, and when he did return, he wouldn't be the same man who left. By 8:15 that evening, Ruland and Deputy Leonard Walsh stood in the Elkhart Park parking area at 9,300 feet. Terry Pollard waited beside his truck with 3 men who had the hollow-eyed look of people whose adventure had turned into a nightmare. Rick Donovan stepped forward first. Mid-20s, athletic build, but his hands were shaking badly enough that he shoved them in his pockets. "David's wife is pregnant," Donovan said. 4 months. He was so excited about this trip, kept talking about how he wanted to come back when the baby was old enough. Show them real wilderness. His voice cracked. "She doesn't know he's missing yet. We didn't want to call until we were sure." That detail hit Ruland in the chest. A pregnant wife back home, waiting for a call that wouldn't come. Paul Summers, the second friend, spoke up. He was older, maybe 35, with the cautious demeanor of an engineer. David was careful. That's what makes this so wrong. He wasn't reckless. He marked his route, checked in regularly. Then he just wasn't there anymore. The third man, Greg Halstead, was the quietest of the group. He kept looking back toward the mountains, visible as dark shapes against the star-filled sky. "Something's wrong up there. I felt it yesterday. Like we were being watched from places where nobody could be standing." "Felt what?" Walsh asked. "Presence. Weight. Like the air itself was paying attention to us." Halstead met Ruland's eyes. "You think I'm crazy?" "No," Ruland said slowly. "I don't." Because Margaret's grandmother had said the same thing. When the mountains watch you, you go home. The hike to Island Lake took 4 hours in darkness. The trail wound through lodgepole pine forest that seemed to press in from all sides. Walsh noticed it first. No animals. Ruland had been thinking the same thing. No marmots, no birds, not even insects. Just their boots on stone and the whisper of wind that sounded almost like breathing. The forest felt evacuated, abandoned by everything with the sense to leave. They reached the camp at midnight. David Crouch's tent sat neat and organized, his sleeping bag still in its stuff sack, his journal lying open to the last entry. Ruland picked it up, reading by flashlight. August 30th. Tomorrow we fish Island Lake. Terry says the cutthroat are huge up there. I can't wait. This place is like another world. The stars last night were so bright they hurt to look at. Made me think about the baby, about bringing our kid here someday. Made me think about how small we are, how big everything else is. Sometimes I feel like the mountains are watching us. Is that weird? Terry laughed when I said it, but I swear the peaks look different every time I turn around, like they're moving when we're not looking. Too much altitude maybe, or maybe not enough sleep. Either way, tomorrow's going to be perfect. I can feel it. Ruland closed the journal, something cold settling in his stomach. David Crouch had felt it too. The presence, the watching. They found Crouch's fishing spot on the western shore. The rod lay on the bank, lying still in the water. Tackle box open, lures gleaming in the flashlight beam. Boot prints in the granite dust, clear and unmistakable, walking along the shore for 20 feet. Then nothing. Walsh knelt, examining the prints. Hank, they just stop. Middle of open rock. Ruland studied the ground. Walsh was right. No scuff marks, no sign of jumping or climbing. The prints simply ended as if Crouch had been plucked into the air. Look at this, Walsh said, pointing to the tackle box. One of the lures was different from the others, handmade, the kind someone crafts for their own personal collection. Attached to it was a small piece of paper, waterproof fishing tag paper, written in neat handwriting. For baby Crouch. First fish gets this lure. Love, Dad. Ruland felt his throat tighten. David Crouch had been planning his future, making memories for a child who would now grow up without ever meeting their father. Sheriff? Walsh's voice was strange. What is that? Across the lake, 30 feet above the water, a pale blue light hovered in the air. It pulsed with a rhythm that reminded Ruland of a heartbeat, steady and organic. The light moved laterally, impossibly smooth, defying any aircraft physics Ruland understood. Then it shot straight up into the darkness, accelerating at a speed that should have created a sonic boom, but left only silence. The moment it vanished, pressure slammed into Ruland's skull. His vision tunneled, sounds became muffled and distant. Beside him, Walsh gasped and stumbled, blood beginning to drip from his nose. "Base, this is Ruland." His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Anyone seeing unusual activity?" Static crackled, then Pollard's voice, tinny and far away. "Negative, Sheriff." Walsh wiped blood from his upper lip, his hand shaking violently. "What the hell was that? I heard something, not with my ears, inside my head, like someone whispering in a language I almost understood." Ruland had heard it too, a voice that wasn't a voice, speaking words that weren't words, conveying meaning that bypassed language entirely. Curiosity, assessment, recognition. "We're not alone up here," Ruland said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean whatever took David Crouch is still here, and it knows we're looking for him." By dawn, Island Lake looked like a military operation. 52 volunteers assembled as 2 Wyoming National Guard helicopters circled overhead, their rotors creating echoes that bounced off the granite walls in disorienting patterns. Ruland coordinated search grids while trying to ignore the growing knot in his gut. The search teams spread out in organized patterns, standard procedure, textbook execution, but nothing about this felt standard. At 10:30, Calvin Pritchard called in. Pritchard was 67, had been hiking these mountains since before Ruland was born. When he said he'd found something, his voice carried an edge Ruland had never heard before. "Sheriff, you need to see this, and you need to see it now." Ruland found him standing over Crouch's tracks, staring at them like they were a puzzle that hurt to solve. The boot prints were still visible, pressed into exposed granite covered with fine dust. They walked north along the shore, clear as photographs, each print showing the tread pattern of Crouch's hiking boots. Then they stopped. Not faded, not obscured. Simply stopped in the middle of open rock, as if Crouch had been erased mid-stride. Pritchard was shaking his head slowly. 40 years I've been in these mountains, seen plenty of people get lost, fall, get hurt, recovered bodies from ravines, found lost hikers miles from where they should have been. Never seen anything like this. Could he have jumped? Tried to leap across to that boulder? Sheriff, that boulder is 12 feet away. Nobody jumps 12 feet, and even if they did, there'd be a scuff mark, a skid, some indication of takeoff. This is like he just floated away, or like something reached down and plucked him straight up. Behind them, Rick Donovan had followed from camp. He stared at the tracks with the expression of a man watching his understanding of reality collapse. "This isn't possible," Donovan said. "People don't just disappear like this." "They do in these mountains," Pritchard said quietly. "Always have. The old-timers know. The guides know. We just don't talk about it because nobody would believe us." "Talk about what?" Pritchard met Ruland's eyes. "The Shoshone used to say these mountains were doorways, places where the world got thin, where things could cross over. Most of the time the doors are closed, but in late summer, when the sun hits the peaks at certain angles, when the stars align just right, the doors open, and when they open, people go missing." At 2:00 in the afternoon, Tom Fletcher sought Ruland out. Fletcher was a game and fish officer, 34 years old, pragmatic and level-headed. The kind of man who dealt in facts and evidence, who'd seen his share of wilderness tragedies and kept his emotions locked down. But his face was pale, his eyes haunted by something he couldn't quite put into words. "Sheriff, I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm losing it." "Try me." Fletcher glanced around, making sure they were out of earshot from the other searchers. "Last night, around 3 in the morning, I was checking the eastern grid. Standard sweep, nothing unusual. Then I saw a light moving over the water. At first I thought a helicopter, but it was too low, too quiet. Then I thought drone, but the movement was all wrong. It moved like it was alive, like it was swimming through the air instead of flying through it. Like the light Walsh and I saw. Worse than that, Sheriff, because when it passed over me, I felt it looking at me. Not like someone seeing you from a distance, like something reading you, understanding everything you are in a single moment. It knew me, knew things about me I don't tell anyone." "What things?" Fletcher's jaw clenched, and for a moment Ruland thought he wouldn't answer. Then the words came out in a rush. "My brother and I planned a trip to these mountains in 1985. Just the two of us. A week-long camping and fishing adventure. 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, he died in a car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. I've always felt guilty I didn't die with him, guilty I got to keep living when he didn't. And whatever that light was, it saw that guilt. It looked into me and saw every moment I've spent wishing I'd been in that car with him. It saw everything, Sheriff. Every fear, every regret, every secret. And then it moved on, like it was just cataloguing me." Before Ruland could respond, his radio crackled with an urgency that made his stomach drop. "Sheriff, we've got a problem. Morrison's not responding to check-ins." Kyle Morrison was 23, a Pinedale local who'd volunteered because he knew the mountains like most people knew their own backyard. He'd grown up hiking these trails, fishing these lakes. Ruland had assigned him to the northeastern shore specifically because of that experience. Now his radio was silent. They found Morrison's equipment 20 minutes later, arranged at the water's edge with a precision that felt deliberate. Radio powered on, volume turned up, pack sitting upright, contents organized. Flashlight still burning in the shallows, its beam cutting through the clear water to illuminate the rocky bottom 15 feet down. His boot prints led to the water and stopped, just like Crouch's. But there was something else, something that made every person in the search party take an involuntary step backward. Rocks arranged in a perfect circle on the shore, 12 feet in diameter, each stone equidistant from the next, creating a geometry so precise it had to be intentional. None of the searchers had placed them there. The circle hadn't existed during the morning sweep. Tom Fletcher knelt beside the formation, his hand hovering over one of the stones before making contact. He jerked his hand back immediately. "They're warm, more than warm, they're hot." Ruland felt the stone. It radiated heat like a stove left on high, despite the near-freezing temperature. The granite should have been ice-cold this close to the water. Instead, it felt almost alive, pulsing with internal warmth. Walsh circled the formation slowly, his service weapon drawn, though he didn't seem to realize he'd pulled it. Who did this? Who had time to arrange these? "Nobody," Ruland said. "We've had eyes on this shore all day." "Then how—" "Sheriff," one of the volunteers called out, pointing toward the center of the lake. "The lights." 7 points of blue-white light hovered over the water. They hung motionless for perhaps 10 seconds, then began to move. Not randomly, but in formation. Perfectly synchronized, like a flight team performing an aerial ballet. They descended slowly toward the water's surface. Then one broke away, gliding toward the shore where the search party stood frozen. It moved with terrifying purpose, accelerating smoothly, closing the distance in seconds. "Everyone back to camp, now, move." They ran. The light pursued them for perhaps 100 yards before something happened that would haunt every person in that group for the rest of their lives. As they ran, stumbling over rocks and roots, gasping in the thin air, they heard it. Not a sound in their ears, but inside their heads, resonating in their bones, vibrating in their teeth. A voice that wasn't a voice. Communication that bypassed language entirely and spoke directly to the primitive parts of their brains. Curiosity so intense it felt like hunger. Fascination that bordered on obsession. The sensation of being examined by an intelligence so vast and so utterly alien that the human mind could only grasp fragments of its attention. And underneath that, something that felt like recognition. Like whatever was in that light had encountered humans before and was trying to understand what they were, what they wanted, why they kept coming to these mountains. The light retreated back toward the lake, and the voice faded. But everyone in the group had felt it. Ruland could see it in their faces, pale and shaking, eyes too wide, expressions of people who just had their understanding of reality shattered. They stumbled back into camp at 10:15. Chaos greeted them. 3 volunteers were standing in a tight group near the tree line, pointing toward shapes that moved between the pines. Humanoid forms, too tall and too thin, their movements fluid in ways that violated basic anatomy. When flashlight beams hit them, the light seemed to be absorbed rather than reflected, creating silhouettes darker than the shadows around them. Tom Fletcher was on the ground, unconscious, blood streaming from his nose and ears. Walsh and another volunteer worked to revive him, tilting his head back, checking his breathing. When Fletcher's eyes finally opened, they were glassy and unfocused, staring at something no one else could see. "I saw him," Fletcher whispered, his voice hoarse. "I saw David Crouch. He was standing in something that looked like water, but moved like light, liquid light, flowing around him, through him. He was trying to tell me something, trying to speak, but his mouth wasn't moving. I just heard this one word over and over echoing in my head. Threshold, threshold, threshold." "What does that mean?" Walsh asked. Fletcher's eyes focused slowly on Walsh's face. "I think it means boundary. The edge between here and somewhere else. I think David's stuck on that boundary, caught between worlds, and he's trying to warn us not to follow." At 3:30 in the morning, as the temperature dropped below freezing and the stars wheeled overhead with a brightness that seemed almost aggressive, Ruland made the decision to evacuate. Too many unexplained incidents, too many people at risk, too much happening that he couldn't explain or control. But when the first group tried to descend at dawn, they discovered something that should have been impossible. The trail was gone, not covered by rock slide, not blocked by fallen trees, not obscured by snow. Simply gone. Where yesterday there had been a clearly marked path down the mountain, worn by decades of hikers, now there was only sheer rock face. The mountain had rearranged itself during the night, rewriting its own geography. Walsh stood at what should have been the trailhead, his GPS unit in his hand, staring at the screen with an expression of complete disbelief. "According to this, we're not at Island Lake. The coordinates say we're inside Fremont Peak, in the middle of solid granite. That's impossible." "Everything about this is impossible," Ruland said, "but it's happening anyway." Dr. Raymond Novak arrived at camp that afternoon. Ruland had called him the previous evening from base camp, before everything had spiraled out of control and the geologist had driven through the night from Laramie. Novak was 64, weathered and intense, carrying a briefcase full of documents that looked like they'd been accumulating for decades. He set up in the command tent, spreading papers across the folding table with the methodical precision of a man who'd been preparing for this conversation for years. "Sheriff, I've been studying these mountains for 30 years, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. Now, I need to show you something." The first document was a newspaper clipping from 1963, yellowed with age, the text faded but still legible. Ruland read the headline, "Teenage Girl Vanishes at Green River Lakes." Lynn Diane Olson, Novak said, 16 years old. She and her twin brother were visiting their grandparents' dude ranch. They went for a walk to the lakes. Her brother saw her step onto a footbridge in broad daylight. He looked away for maybe 5 seconds to take a photograph. When he looked back, she was gone. They searched for weeks. Never found a trace. Another document, older and more fragile. 1952, 4-man hunting party near Gannett Peak. All experienced outdoorsmen, all locals who knew these mountains. They were camped near a place called Knife Point Glacier. One morning, 3 of them woke up, and the 4th man was gone. Not just gone, his sleeping bag was still zipped up, his boots still inside the tent. They found his tracks leading away from camp into a snowfield. The tracks went 20 feet and stopped. Just stopped, in the middle of untouched snow. Novak pulled out more documents, creating a timeline that stretched across the table. 1937. A surveyor named William Trent. 1918. 3 miners working a claim near Titcomb Basin. 1891. A hunting guide named Robert Ashford and his client. Every single case follows the same pattern. Late summer, clear weather, people simply vanishing without logical explanation. And always, someone reports seeing lights before the disappearances. He pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages stiff with age. This is from William Trent. He was mapping this region in 1891, trying to chart the peaks and valleys for potential railroad routes. Listen to what he wrote. Novak read aloud, his voice taking on the formal cadence of 19th century prose. August 28th, 1891. The phenomena appeared again last night, more numerous than in previous observations. 7 distinct luminosities hovering over the lake, pulsing in what I can only describe as coordinated rhythm. The men are terrified, though they will not speak of it openly for fear of being thought cowards or madmen. We have lost 2 horses and one of our guides, a Shoshone man named Running Wolf. Before his disappearance, Running Wolf took me aside and spoke words I shall never forget. He said, "The mountains are doorways, Mr. Trent. My people have always known this. Some doors should never be opened, and some should never be walked through. This place, where the peaks touch the sky, this is where the doors are thinnest. When the lights dance, the doors are open, and what waits on the other side is not meant for human eyes." I begin to think he was right. I begin to think we should abandon this survey and never return. "Did he?" Ruland asked. He disappeared on August 30th. His journal was found by a rescue party 2 weeks later. The last entry was the one I just read. Novak spread out a geological survey map, marked with dozens of red X's. Every disappearance I've documented over the past 30 years, 43 people, all of them in this range, all of them in late summer, all of them after reports of unusual lights. What are the lights? That's what I've been trying to understand. The Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho have oral histories about these mountains that go back centuries. They called them various names. Where the spirits watch. The doorway peaks. The mountains that remember. According to their traditions, there were specific times when no one went above the tree line. Late summer, when the days were still long but beginning to shorten, when the night sky showed certain star patterns, when the lights danced, the tribes stayed in the valleys, because people who saw the lights didn't come home, or if they did, they were changed. Changed how? Some spoke in languages no one understood. Some described places that couldn't exist. Some claimed they'd been somewhere else, somewhere adjacent to our world but fundamentally different, and some simply faded away over days or weeks, becoming more and more translucent until they vanished completely, like they were being pulled back to wherever they'd been. Ruland thought of Kyle Morrison, missing for almost 24 hours now. Why late summer specifically? That's what I've been researching. This entire range sits on an ancient impact site. Something massive hit here, billions of years ago, before life existed on Earth. The impact created crystalline structures in the basement rock that are unique to this location. I've analysed core samples, studied the mineral composition. There's something in the granite here that doesn't exist anywhere else. Crystalline matrices that seem to be organised, almost like circuits. You're saying the mountains are artificial? Not artificial, but not entirely natural either, or at least not natural in the way we understand it. Every year, during a specific window in late summer, something happens. Solar radiation, cosmic rays, electromagnetic fluctuations. I'm not sure of the exact mechanism, But whatever it is, it activates those crystalline structures. They resonate, they conduct, they open pathways to somewhere else. You sound like you're talking about science fiction. Novak met his eyes. Sheriff, I'm a geologist. I've spent my entire career studying rocks and minerals and the slow, predictable processes that shape landscapes. I don't believe in science fiction, but I believe in evidence. And the evidence says that these mountains are doing something we don't understand, something that's been happening for millions of years, and we've been walking into it blind and ignorant for as long as humans have been in this region. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Kyle Morrison walked into camp. The entire search operation ground to a halt. 53 people stood frozen, conversations dying mid-sentence, every eye turning toward the young man who stumbled out of the tree line. Morrison was alive, on his feet, apparently unharmed. But something was fundamentally undeniably wrong. His skin had a faint luminescence, subtle in the bright afternoon sun, but unmistakable when he passed through shade. A soft, blue-white glow that seemed to emanate from beneath his skin rather than reflecting from its surface. His eyes reflected light like an animal's, throwing back amber gold when the sun caught them at certain angles. When he moved, there was a fluidity to his motion that wasn't quite human, a smoothness that suggested his joints were working in ways they shouldn't. "Kyle!" One of the volunteers, a woman named Sarah Chen who'd known Morrison since elementary school, rushed forward. But Morrison raised a hand, and she stopped as if she'd hit an invisible barrier, her expression shifting from relief to fear in an instant. When Morrison spoke, his voice had an odd resonance, like harmonics layered beneath his normal tone. Multiple frequencies speaking simultaneously, creating words that felt physical in the air. "I went somewhere. They took me somewhere." Ruland approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. Every instinct screamed danger, but he forced himself to stay calm, to treat this like any other witness interview. "Who took you, Kyle?" They did, the ones who live in the spaces between things, between here and there, between now and then, between what is and what could be. They showed me. Morrison's eyes fixed on Ruland, and the sheriff felt that same sensation of being examined, understood completely in a single moment. They're not aliens, Sheriff. They're from here, from Earth, but from before, from when the world was new and everything was different. Different how? Reality wasn't locked the way it is now. Things were more fluid, more connected. Multiple dimensions overlapping, bleeding into each other. They evolved in that fluidity. Built civilizations in the spaces between dimensions. Learned to move through realities the way we move through rooms. They built networks in the stone, pathways through dimensions we don't have names for, connecting parts of the universe that shouldn't be able to touch. They were mapping everything, trying to understand the fundamental structure of existence. Morrison took a step forward, and Ruland noticed his feet didn't quite touch the ground. He was floating, just barely, maybe half an inch of clearance that shouldn't have been possible. But something went wrong, an experiment that succeeded too well or failed catastrophically. They became trapped between states of being, not fully in any one dimension, not fully in our reality, not fully in theirs. For millions of years they've existed in that liminal space, reaching across, trying to find their way back. And these mountains, these specific peaks, this is where the barrier is thinnest. This is where they can push through. Why are they taking people? They're not taking anyone. People cross the threshold, usually by accident. The lights are warnings, not lures. They're trying to mark the boundaries, show where the thin places are. But humans see lights and they get curious. They investigate, they cross over without meaning to. And once you're on the other side, coming back is almost impossible. Morrison's voice was becoming strained, his luminescence growing brighter. David Crouch is alive. He's with them. They're studying him, trying to understand how human consciousness works. They're fascinated by us, by the way we think, the way we create meaning from chaos, the way we love and fear and hope. They want to communicate, but they don't understand that the attempt destroys us. Our nervous systems aren't built to handle what they are. The human brain can't process their reality without breaking. Where is he, Kyle? Where's David? Everywhere and nowhere. He's standing in a place that's right here but also isn't, like being on the other side of a one-way mirror, seeing everything but unable to touch it, unable to interact, unable to come back. Morrison's voice broke, and for a moment he sounded like the 23-year-old kid from Pinedale again, scared and desperate. He knows about the baby, his wife Donna. He's trying so hard to get back to her, but he can't. The threshold only opens one way. You can cross over, but crossing back requires help from the other side. And they don't understand what bringing someone back would mean. They don't understand death or separation the way we do. Morrison looked around at the assembled searchers, his glowing eyes moving from face to face. They sent me back to deliver a message. Leave these mountains. Don't come back. Not in late summer, not when the barriers are thin. The threshold is weakening. Every year it gets a little thinner, a little easier to cross. Soon they'll be able to push through completely, manifest physically in our reality, and when they do, both species will suffer. We can't comprehend them without our minds breaking, and they can't exist in our reality without causing catastrophic disruptions to fundamental physical laws. His legs buckled. Ruland caught him, but Morrison felt wrong in his arms. Too light, like he weighed maybe half what he should. His body temperature was far too low, barely above the ambient air temperature. "Tell them," Morrison whispered, his voice fading. "Tell everyone. Close the mountains. Before it's too—" He didn't finish the sentence. His skin became translucent, and Ruland could see through him to the ground below, to the tent fabric behind him, to the mountains in the distance. It happened over the course of perhaps 10 minutes, Morrison fading like a photograph left in the sun, his features becoming less and less distinct, his body becoming more and more transparent until he simply wasn't there anymore. The last thing Ruland heard was Morrison's voice, distant and fading like an echo in a canyon. He called the baby Emma. "David wants his daughter to be named Emma. Tell Donna. Please tell her." Silence fell over the camp. 53 people stood motionless, processing what they'd just witnessed, their understanding of reality fundamentally altered. Some wept. Some stared at the spot where Morrison had vanished, as if expecting him to reappear. Some simply sat down, overwhelmed. Dr. Novak was furiously writing in a notebook, his hand shaking, covering pages with observations and theories. Tom Fletcher was on his knees, either praying or in shock. Walsh just stared at Ruland with an expression that asked a question neither of them could answer. What do we do now? At 4 o'clock that afternoon, someone noticed the trail had returned. Paul Summers, one of Crouch's friends from Maryland, had walked to the edge of camp and called out in disbelief. The path down the mountain was back, exactly where it should be, as if it had never been gone. Ruland didn't hesitate, didn't question the impossibility. "Everyone out, now. Leave everything non-essential. We move fast, and we don't stop until we're off this mountain." They moved as a group, 53 people in a tight formation, no one willing to be separated from the others. They made it 3 miles before the lights appeared. Dozens of them this time, perhaps 50 or more, surrounding the group on all sides. They descended from the peaks in a coordinated pattern, moving with obvious intelligence and purpose, creating formations that seemed almost military in their precision. People began to panic. Some broke from the group, running blindly. Others froze, paralyzed by fear. Ruland fired his weapon into the air, the sharp crack echoing off granite walls, shocking everyone back to focus. "On the ground! Everyone down! Don't look at them!" 53 people dropped prone on the trail. The lights circled them, pulsing and shifting, creating patterns that seemed to carry meaning Ruland couldn't quite grasp. Geometric formations that hurt to look at directly, shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. Several searchers began to seize, their bodies convulsing. More nosebleeds, blood staining the granite. Tom Fletcher was weeping, describing visions of David Crouch standing in chambers of pure light, his body transformed into something that was still recognizably human, but touched by something utterly alien, his eyes showing understanding of realities that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. Rick Donovan was speaking in a language no one recognized, guttural sounds and clicking consonants that seemed to come from a throat not shaped for English. When the seizure passed and he could speak normally again, he had no memory of what he'd said. The lights orbited for exactly 10 minutes. Ruland counted, watching his watch, noting the precision. Then, as one, they rose into the sky in a spiral pattern and vanished, leaving only after-images burned into everyone's retinas. "Run," Ruland said. "Now, don't stop, don't look back, run." They ran through gathering dusk, stumbling over rocks and roots, gasping in the thin air, driven by a terror that went beyond rational thought. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to give out. They ran until the forest opened up and they saw lights ahead. The parking area, civilization, safety. They reached the trailhead at 10 o'clock that night. Ambulances were waiting, their red and blue lights reflecting off the surrounding trees. Media trucks lined the road, reporters shouting questions that none of the searchers could answer. Ruland pushed through the chaos, found a phone in the ranger station and made a call. "Margaret, I need you to do something for me. Find David Crouch's wife. Her name is Donna. Tell her David said to name the baby Emma." "Hank, what happened up there?" "They're saying 2 men are missing, that people are in the hospital with seizures and psychological trauma." "What happened?" "I'll explain when I get home. Just please, call Donna Crouch. It's important. Tell her David is thinking about her and the baby. Tell her he wants the baby named Emma." "Hank, you're scaring me." "I know, I'm sorry, but please, just make the call." 3 days later, Ruland sat in his office and wrote his report. Every detail, every witness statement, every impossible thing they'd seen. He documented it all with the thoroughness of someone who knows he's writing for posterity, for a future where maybe someone will believe what happened. He attached photos that showed the lights, though they appeared as blurred orbs in the images, their true nature impossible to capture on film. He included sketches of the rock formations, the circle of heated stones, the places where boot prints simply ended. He attached medical reports from the hospital, documenting the seizures, the nosebleeds, the psychological trauma affecting multiple witnesses. He wrote about Kyle Morrison's testimony in detail, recording everything the young man had said before he faded away. He wrote about the voices they'd heard, the sensations they'd felt, the understanding that something vast and ancient and profoundly alien was present in those mountains. He filed it officially, submitted it to the state police, the federal authorities, the Forest Service. He made copies and sent them to everyone he could think of. The federal agents arrived within 72 hours, and they were polite but firm. No names, no identification shown. They interviewed every witness privately, emphasized confidentiality agreements, mentioned national security implications without ever explicitly saying what those implications were. They confiscated all physical evidence, photos, recordings, Dr. Novak's notebooks, the rock samples he'd collected. The official story came together quickly. Mass hallucination caused by altitude, environmental stress, and possibly water contamination. The missing men were declared lost to wilderness accidents. The medical incidents were attributed to acute mountain sickness and dehydration. Everyone was advised to seek counseling and to refrain from discussing the incident publicly. But Ruland had made copies. He'd hidden evidence in his personal files, kept his own recordings, documented everything twice before submitting the official report, because he knew this wasn't over. He knew the disappearances would continue, and he knew that someday someone would need to know what really happened on Island Lake in August of 1997. Over the next 3 months, 4 more people vanished in the Wind River Range. A solo hiker named Timothy Preston, last seen on the trail to Titcomb Basin. A couple celebrating their anniversary, camping near Seneca Lake. A wildlife photographer who'd been documenting the autumn colors, all in the same general area, all in late afternoon or early evening. None of them were ever found. Ruland investigated each case privately, building a file that would eventually fill 3 boxes stored in his basement. He discovered patterns that went back not just decades but centuries, Native American warnings that were dismissed as superstition, explorer accounts that were written off as exaggeration, mining disasters where the bodies were never recovered, usually attributed to cave-ins but often occurring in locations where no caves existed, climbing expeditions that simply vanished, their equipment found scattered, but the climbers themselves gone without a trace. In December, he received a call from Maryland. Donna Crouch had given birth to a healthy baby girl. She'd named her Emma, though when the nurses asked why, she couldn't explain. She'd been having dreams, she told Ruland. Dreams where David came to her, not speaking but somehow communicating. Dreams where he showed her the name written in light. Dreams that felt more real than waking life. "Sheriff Ruland, do you think David's still alive out there?" Ruland thought about Morrison's testimony, about the lights, about the voices that spoke without sound. He thought about what he'd felt when those lights passed overhead, the sense of being connected to something vast and incomprehensible. "I think part of him is, Mrs. Crouch. I think part of him is in a place we don't have words for. And I think he's trying to reach you the only way he can, through dreams, through feelings, through the name he wants for his daughter. Will he ever come home? I don't know. I wish I could tell you yes, but I don't know." After he hung up, Ruland sat in his office for a long time, staring at the map of the Wind River Range on his wall. He'd marked every disappearance with a red pin. The map looked like it had a disease, red spots clustered around Island Lake, Titcomb Basin, the high passes near Fremont Peak. The years passed. Ruland continued his investigation, documenting every disappearance, every sighting of lights, every anomaly he could find. He tried to get the mountains closed during late summer. He presented his evidence to the Forest Service, to state officials, to anyone who would listen. But no one took action. Tourist revenue was too important. Recreation dollars were too valuable. A few missing hikers every year, tragic as it was, wasn't enough to justify restricting access to one of Wyoming's premier wilderness areas. By 2005, Ruland was preparing to retire. 29 years in law enforcement, 4 terms as sheriff, a career spent protecting people who didn't always want to be protected. He was tired. The things he'd seen on Island Lake had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with years. But there was one last thing he needed to do. On September 1st, 2005, exactly 8 years after David Crouch disappeared, Ruland hiked back to Island Lake. Alone. He told his deputies he was taking a personal day, didn't tell them where he was going. Margaret knew, though. She'd found him packing his gear the night before. "Don't go," she'd said. "Please, Hank, let it go. You've done everything you can." "I need to understand. After all these years, all this investigation, I need to see it for myself one more time. I need to know if I was right. And if you were, if you see those lights again, what then? Then I'll finally have the answers I've been looking for, and maybe I can help David find his way home." "You can't save him, Hank. He's been gone for 8 years. "I know, but maybe I can understand what happened to him. Maybe I can finally give Donna and Emma some closure." He'd left a letter on the kitchen table, sealed in an envelope with Margaret's name on it. She hadn't opened it. She'd just watched him drive away, tears streaming down her face, knowing somehow that he wouldn't come back. Ruland reached Island Lake at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The water was mirror-smooth, reflecting the surrounding peaks with perfect clarity. He set up camp on the western shore, in the exact spot where David Crouch had last been seen. He arranged his equipment methodically, recording devices, cameras, notebooks. He cleaned his service weapon, though he had no illusions it would help if things went wrong. As darkness fell, he turned on his audio recorder and began to speak. "This is Hank Ruland, September 1st, 2005. Margaret, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I know you didn't want me to come back here, but I had to. After 8 years of questions, 8 years of investigations that led nowhere, 8 years of watching people disappear and being powerless to stop it, I had to come back. I had to see for myself if what we experienced in 1997 was real, or if we were all just victims of some kind of mass delusion. I've spent these 8 years documenting disappearances in these mountains, 43 people in 8 years, 43 families destroyed, 43 lives cut short, 43 mysteries that will never be solved through conventional investigation. The official explanation is always the same: accidents, harsh terrain, unprepared hikers making fatal mistakes. But I know better. I've seen the patterns, I've read the historical accounts, I've talked to the Shoshone elders who still remember the old warnings. Something lives in these mountains, something old beyond comprehension, something that exists in the spaces between realities. They're not malevolent, I don't think, not evil in any way we'd understand. They're just fundamentally incompatible with human existence, like matter and antimatter. When we touch, Destruction is inevitable. David Crouch's daughter Emma is 7 years old now. I get updates from Donna every few months. She sends me pictures, tells me about Emma's progress in school, shares the small triumphs of raising a child alone. Emma's smart, creative, loves to draw and paint. She draws her father sometimes, even though she never met him. And she always draws him the same way, standing in blue light with his arms outstretched like he's trying to reach through the canvas. I think David's trying to tell her he's okay, or as okay as anyone can be when they're stuck between worlds, trapped in a state of existence that human minds aren't equipped to process. Kyle Morrison's family still asks about him. They've never accepted that he's gone, never had a funeral, never had closure. How do you have closure when someone fades away like morning mist? How do you mourn someone who might still exist somewhere, just not here? Tom Fletcher left the game and fish department, said he couldn't work in these mountains anymore, couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him every time he went above the tree line. He moved to Colorado, got a job in the flatlands where he could see horizon in every direction and didn't have to worry about what might be lurking in the peaks. Dr. Novak continued his research. He published one paper about crystalline structures in ancient impact sites, but it was rejected by every major geology journal. They said his conclusions were unscientific, his methodology flawed. What they really meant was that his findings were too disturbing, too far outside conventional understanding. He died in 2011 stroke. I sometimes wonder if the things he learned about these mountains contributed to that. If understanding too much can be fatal in its own way. The Shoshone were right. They've always been right. These mountains are sacred, but sacred doesn't mean safe. Sometimes it means forbidden. Sometimes it means danger that we're not equipped to understand or survive. If you're planning to visit the Wind River Range, especially in late summer, reconsider. And if you must go, and you see lights hovering over the water, if you feel a presence pressing against your mind, if you hear voices that bypass your ears and speak directly to your thoughts, run. Don't try to understand. Don't try to communicate. Don't let curiosity override survival instinct. Just run and don't look back. I see them now. 3 lights over the water, descending slowly. I'm not running. I need to see this. I need to understand what happened to David, to Kyle, to all of them. Maybe I can learn something that will help protect future visitors. Maybe I can finally answer the questions that have haunted me for 8 years. Margaret, I love you. I've loved you since we were teenagers, and I'll love you wherever I end up. Tell our kids I'm sorry I couldn't be there to watch them grow old. Tell them their father went looking for answers, because some questions are too important to leave alone. The lights are close now. I can feel them in my head, like someone knocking on a door I didn't know was there. It's not painful. It's almost gentle, almost welcoming, like they're asking permission this time instead of just taking, like they've learned something from all the humans who've crossed over, learned that we're conscious beings who deserve the choice. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to let them show me what's on the other side. I'm going to see what they wanted David to see, what Kyle saw, before he faded away. Maybe I'll find David there. Maybe I can tell him his daughter is beautiful and bright and everything he hoped she'd be. Maybe I can bring back answers that will finally make sense of all this. The lights are here. They're descending around me, surrounding me, and the sensation is overwhelming. It's like being embraced by the universe itself, like being dissolved and reconstituted at the same time. I can see through them, or maybe into them. Vast spaces that shouldn't exist, geometries that hurt to perceive, colours that don't have names because human eyes were never meant to see them. I understand now. I understand what happened to David, why he couldn't come back. It's not that he's dead. It's that he's become something else. Something more, something less. Something that exists in a state that has no correlation to human life. The voice is back, inside my head, bypassing language. It's showing me things. The history of this place, the beings who built the networks in the stone, the accident that trapped them between dimensions. They've been reaching out for millions of years, trying to understand the universe they're trapped in, trying to find their way back to wherever they came from. They don't understand death. They don't understand separation the way we do. They thought they were helping when they took David, when they took Kyle. They thought they were offering knowledge, offering transcendence. They didn't understand that human consciousness is too fragile for what they want to show us. But they're learning. They're trying to learn. And maybe someday, generations from now, they'll figure out how to communicate without destroying us. Maybe someday humans and whatever they are can coexist. Maybe someday the threshold won't be fatal. But not today. Not yet. The lights are too bright. The voice is too loud. I can feel myself starting to fade, starting to become something other than Hank Ruland. It's not painful. It's just overwhelming. Margaret, I love you. Tell the others I was right. Tell them the mountains are alive in ways we never imagined. Tell them... Static. Sheriff Hank Ruland never returned from Island Lake. His body was never found. His campsite was discovered 3 days later by a Forest Service ranger doing routine patrol. The tent was standing, gear neatly organized. The recording device was found 50 feet offshore, submerged in 15 feet of water, sealed in a waterproof case that was still functioning. The audio you heard was extracted from that device. But there's more on the tape, 7 additional minutes of sound that took 17 years to be released because of what it contains. Sounds that forensic audio specialists say cannot be produced by any natural source or known technology. Harmonics that create interference patterns never documented before. Frequencies that fall outside the range of human hearing, but were somehow captured on the recording. And underneath it all, a voice, using Hank Ruland's vocal patterns, but saying things that make no linguistic sense, speaking in languages that don't exist, describing geometries and concepts that violate known physics, explaining things that human language has no words for. The recording was classified for national security reasons. The few people who've heard the full version, all of whom signed extensive non-disclosure agreements, describe it as disturbing beyond description. Not because of what's said, but because of what it implies. That human consciousness can be altered. That reality is more fluid than we believe. That boundaries we think are absolute can be crossed. David Crouch was declared legally dead in 2004, 7 years after his disappearance. His daughter Emma is now 32 years old. She earned a PhD in theoretical physics from MIT, specializing in dimensional theory and quantum boundary conditions. She's never spoken publicly about her father, but she visits the Wind River Range every August. She camps at Island Lake, and according to local rangers who've encountered her there, she's often seen standing at the water's edge at dawn, looking at something no one else can see, having conversations with someone who isn't there. Kyle Morrison remains officially listed as missing, presumed dead. His family erected a memorial at the Elkhart Park trailhead, a simple stone plaque with his name and dates. Sometimes hikers report seeing a young man standing near the memorial, translucent in the morning light, before he fades away like mist. Sheriff Hank Ruland is still an open missing person case. His wife Margaret maintained until her death in 2018 that he was alive somewhere, somehow. Every year on September 1st, she would receive a phone call. No one on the line, just static. But in the static, she swore she could hear Hank's voice saying 3 words. I found them. Island Lake is still open to the public. The Wind River Range sees thousands of visitors every year. The official disappearance statistics say 1 or 2 people go missing annually, usually attributed to falls, exposure, or getting lost. But the real numbers are higher, much higher, because some disappearances are never reported. Some people vanish and their families never file reports, either out of shame or fear or because they don't want to admit their loved one is gone. Some people are travelling alone, have no one waiting for them at home, and when they don't return, no one notices. And some people, according to the rangers who work these mountains, walk into the wilderness intentionally seeking the lights, seeking whatever took David Crouch and Kyle Morrison and Hank Ruland, seeking transcendence or knowledge or escape from mundane reality. They walk to Island Lake in late summer, set up camp on the western shore, and wait for the lights to come. Most of them are never seen again. I spoke with Terry Pollard last month. He's 73 now, still operating Bald Mountain Outfitters, still taking people into the Wind River Range, still guiding tours to Island Lake. When I asked him about David Crouch, about the lights, about Sheriff Ruland, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said, Every guide who's worked these mountains more than 5 years has seen them. The lights. We all know something's out there. We don't talk about it because talking doesn't help. The mountains were here long before us, and they'll be here long after. Some places aren't meant for humans. But people don't listen. They never have. Why do you keep taking people up there if you know it's dangerous? Because it's not about the danger. It's about respect. You go up there with proper respect, understanding you're a visitor in someone else's territory, following the old rules. You come back. You go up there thinking you own the place, thinking the mountains owe you an experience. That's when they take you. The mountains are teaching us a lesson we're too arrogant to learn. What lesson? That we're not special, that there are older things than us, bigger things, and we're just passing through their territory. We're the visitors, we're the intruders, and sometimes they remind us of that. Have you seen the lights? He looked at me with eyes that had seen things he couldn't explain. 47 years I've been guiding in these mountains. Yes, I've seen them, multiple times. The first time was 1978, my second year as an outfitter. I was camping at Island Lake with a group of clients. Around midnight the lights appeared over the water, 7 of them moving in formation. Everyone in camp saw them. Some people wanted to investigate, get closer. I told them no, told them we'd stay in camp, stay together, wait until morning. They listened, and we all came home. What would have happened if they'd investigated? I don't know, but I can guess. Same thing that happened to David Crouch. Same thing that's happened to dozens of others. The lights are a warning and an invitation. How you respond determines whether you come back. I'll leave you with one final detail. 3 months ago, a hiker named Benjamin Cross was rescued from the Wind River Range after being missing for 6 days. He was found at Island Lake unconscious, suffering from severe hypothermia and dehydration. When he woke up in the hospital in Lander, he told the doctors something that got him put under psychiatric evaluation for 72 hours. He said he'd met David Crouch, that Crouch had found him when he was lost and disoriented, led him back toward the main trail, kept him alive through 2 freezing nights. When the rescue helicopter arrived, Cross said Crouch had simply smiled and walked back toward the water, his body becoming translucent, dissolving into blue light. The doctors called it hypothermia-induced hallucination. Probably was. The human brain does strange things when it's dying from cold and oxygen deprivation. But Benjamin Cross had something in his pocket when they found him. Something the doctors couldn't explain. A handmade fishing lure, old and weathered, with a waterproof tag attached. The tag read, "For Baby Crouch. First fish gets this lure. Love, Dad." Donna Crouch confirmed it was David's handwriting. She confirmed it was the lure David had made before the trip in 1997. The lure that had been in his tackle box when he disappeared. The lure that should have been at the bottom of Island Lake for 27 years. No one can explain how it ended up in Benjamin Cross's pocket. Cross himself has no memory of finding it. He says David just pressed it into his hand as they walked through the darkness, told him to give it to his daughter, told him to tell her that her father loved her and was proud of the woman she'd become. Emma Crouch has the lure now. She keeps it in a display case in her office at MIT, alongside a photograph of her father she's never actually seen but had painted based on descriptions. She says sometimes, late at night when she's working on her research, she'll look up and see the lure glowing faintly with blue light. Just for a moment, just long enough to remind her that her father is still out there, somewhere, watching over her from a place human science has yet to understand. This has been Void Case Files. If this story disturbed you, if you think others need to hear it, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by New Year's. We're here every single day, bringing you the cases that official channels want buried, the stories that demand to be told. Sheriff Hank Ruland tried to warn us. David Crouch tried to come home. Kyle Morrison delivered a message we refuse to believe. How many more warnings do we need before we listen? Until next time, stay vigilant, stay aware. And if you're planning a trip to the Wind River Range this summer, remember what the Shoshone always knew. Some mountains are sacred, some doors should never be opened, some lights should never be followed, and some places, no matter how beautiful they appear, are not meant for human feet to tread. The Wind River Range is one of those places. The peaks remember, the stones watch. And when late summer comes and the barriers grow thin, something ancient stirs in the spaces between realities, reaching out with curiosity that kills and fascination that destroys. Good night. And to Sheriff Hank Ruland, David Crouch, Kyle Morrison, and the 43 others who never came home from those mountains, may you finally find peace wherever you are. May the lights that took you be gentle, and may the threshold you crossed lead somewhere beautiful, even if it's a beauty human eyes were never meant to see. They're still watching,